She was very outgoing. She was very beautiful always. You know, she was a very popular girl, very athletic, and she loved gardening. I mean, she had it made at home. She had nothing to run away from.
If they were doing stuff like that, more people should have known, because
The family should have known first.
I firmly believe that the more people that know information, somebody saw something somewhere, and whether it was a critical piece of information, it might have led to a critical piece of information.
I do stupid things when I was younger, yeah. Did I understand why I was doing them? No.
Did you kill Belinda? Did you kidnap her or have anything to do with her going missing?
I first typed Belinda Van Lith's name into my notes 2 years ago. I was compiling a list of people who had gone missing over the years, cold cases to cover. But it wasn't until the spring of 2023 that I really started looking into Belinda's story. At the time, I didn't know a lot about Belinda. Newspaper archives included a few stories about her, with very basic information. Belinda was 17 years old when she went missing. She was last heard from on June 15th, 1974, and at the time she vanished, she was house-sitting for a neighbor on Eagle Lake, just outside of Monticello, Minnesota. From what I could tell, law enforcement initially suspected Belinda was a runaway. But after a while, they changed their tune and believed her disappearance was the result of foul play. Here's what really caught my attention. There was no media coverage in 1974, or even in the years that followed. It seemed Belinda's story hit the papers in the mid-2000s, when Wright County Sheriff's Office investigators connected her case to a suspected serial killer, Timothy Crosby, who is now locked up at a sex offender treatment facility in Moose Lake, Minnesota. That was quite a jump, from a complete lack of coverage to a main suspect in the case. Clearly, there was more to this story. What happened between 1974 and the mid-2000s that led investigators to so confidently determine Crosby was their guy? And maybe more importantly, what didn't happen during those silent years? That's what I set out to discover, and what led to the release of the investigative file for her family and for this story, all with some hope that someone out there might learn something about Belinda's investigation that could lead to answers. It's also what led me to a secured facility in Moose Lake, Minnesota, on a cold January afternoon, where I set up my recorder and 2 microphones and sat down face to face with that suspect, Timothy Crosby. You're listening to The Vault. I'm Trisha Taurinskas. I'm an investigative reporter with Forum News Service. This series is dedicated to the missing persons case of Belinda Van Lith and the investigation that followed. Belinda stood 5 feet 10 inches tall. She weighed around 110 pounds. She was pretty, with long, straight, light brown hair and blue eyes. She wore bib overalls and liked gardening.
She was very outgoing, and she was very beautiful always. You know, she was a very popular girl, very athletic, and she loved gardening, and all around a fun person to be with. Very smart, very bright.
That's Diane, Belinda's best friend from high school. I got in contact with her through Belinda's younger sister, Cindy. I first reached out to Cindy in the spring of 2023 to see if her family could provide any insight into Belinda's disappearance. And I wanted to learn more about Belinda.
She was somebody who really, really, really just
loved everybody and was social, kind, helpful. Just really, she was a great sister. And we all just we really, really enjoyed her. She would always help you and do things for you. I mean, I just have so many good memories of that.
I also wanted to know if they were willing to be a part of this project because this is their story. Belinda is the victim in this story, yes, but her family members are too. They have been left behind to grieve a loss with no closure. They have walked through their lives with a missing piece, wondering where she had gone. Cindy reached out to her siblings and made arrangements for them to get together with me at her house, located in a suburb roughly 45 minutes northwest of Minneapolis, not too far from where Belinda went missing. Before I made the trip, I called the Wright County Sheriff's Office to gather whatever information they were willing to provide regarding Belinda's case. Reaching out to law enforcement is standard when covering missing persons and cold cases. Investigators don't often give away much information, but sometimes you ask the right question at the right time and they reveal a new piece of information. Or, at the very least, they'll confirm some critical facts in the case. That wasn't how it went with Wright County, initially.
Hi, you've reached Captain Eric Kunkel with the Wright County Sheriff's Office. Please leave a message after the tone.
Hey, Captain, this is Trisha Taurinskas calling with Forum News Service about the Belinda Van Lith case. Wondering if I could ask you a few more questions.
That's me leaving a voicemail for Wright County Criminal Investigations Division Captain Eric Kunkel. Shortly after leaving that voicemail, he called me back.
Hi, Trisha. Captain Eric Kunkel, Wright County Sheriff's Office, calling you back. At this point, there's nothing more I can release to you regarding your questions on a potential suspect and what currently is not public information is not public information. So if you have any questions, give me a call.
That did not sit well with me or Belinda's siblings.
Wendy, this is Trish. Hi, Trish.
Hi, Wendy. Nice to meet you. During my first visit to Cindy's, Belinda's siblings gathered around her kitchen table. It was covered with Belinda's yearbooks, drawings, keepsakes, and pictures from the time she was a baby until the time she went missing. Belinda's siblings were nice. They were funny and kind. It was almost hard to believe their childhood had been darkened by the loss of their sister and the decades of grief and mystery that followed. We spent that first hour talking about what they remembered about the investigation that followed Belinda's disappearance. It turned out there wasn't much to remember. Belinda's brother and sister recall Wright County Sheriff's deputies knocking on their door in the mid-2000s, requesting saliva swabs to create a DNA profile for Belinda. I learned that was around the time a new detective was assigned to the case, Wright County Sheriff's Lieutenant Mike Lindquist. But that was about it. Investigators didn't question the siblings or ask them to participate in the investigation. Beyond that, they never have. For nearly 50 years, her siblings were not asked critical questions. They didn't receive briefings from law enforcement. There were no regular updates. They were, for the most part, kept in the dark. They believed the silence was the result of a stalled investigation that never went anywhere. I left Cindy's house that day and called Captain Eric Kunkel again.
Hi, Captain. This is Trisha Taurinskas calling with Forum News Service again. Since my last call to you, I did meet with Belinda Van Lith's family, a group of her siblings, actually, and they were pretty frustrated with your decision to not share any information. I'm sure you're aware that they have not been kept in the loop throughout the years and have a lot of questions. And, seeing as though this is a 50-year-old case, they're just looking for closure. some information and just to be respected. Obviously, this case is very, very old and they have a lot of questions. No, I know in your voicemail you said you weren't willing to share anything. Again, I'd like you to reconsider if you could answer a few questions that I have. I understand you don't want to compromise the integrity of the investigation, but answering some pretty basic questions would even be helpful. And because at this point, the story that I'm going to write is that there is a family who doesn't have any answers, hasn't been kept in the loop, and after 50 years are being denied any information. So hopefully we can change that and write a story about, Belinda, what happened to her, and hopefully, the hope with making these stories public is that if there is somebody out there who knew something, maybe they're approaching the end of their life or whatever it is, where they would feel like they want to come forward with some valuable information.
Belinda's siblings did the same. Within days, Lieutenant Mike Lindquist, who works alongside Kunkel, agreed to release the file to the family, with the knowledge that they'd be sharing the file with Forum News Service. Before Lieutenant Mike Lindquist handed it over to Belinda's siblings, though, the file had to go through a series of redactions with the county attorney to protect victims' names and information. After 4 months of waiting, the file was ready in mid-August. Lieutenant Mike Lindquist drove to Cindy's home and handed over a USB flash drive. Inside were the long-awaited contents of her sister's case file. There's something almost mysterious about a flash drive, a lightweight piece of technology that fits in the palm of your hand, composed of plastic, rubber, and metal. Unlike a wrapped gift, its exterior or weight gives no indication of what's inside. And then there's that moment when you plug it into a computer's USB drive, click, and open its contents. For Cindy, that moment, that click, revealed more than 1,200 pages of investigative files, pictures, police reports, interview transcripts, search warrants, aerial maps, details regarding excavation digs, bone samples, and suspect lists, spanning decades. Each page, each piece of the file, existed for one purpose: to find out what happened to her sister, Belinda. I received word from Cindy in late August that the family was ready to share the file. When I arrived at Cindy's, I was greeted by her and her niece, who had printed off the entirety of the file. There it sat, a large, heavy, 3-ring blue binder filled to the brim with documents. What was even more memorable than that big blue binder, though, was Cindy's reaction. She had tears welling up in her blue eyes. She said she and her family had no idea that this much work went into the quest to find out what happened to her sister. She wished they had known sooner, and most importantly, she wished their mom, Beverly, knew too, because that case file revealed more than just information, facts, and interviews. It showed that Belinda wasn't forgotten. Their father, Clifford, died in 1998 following injuries from a car accident. Their mother, Beverly, passed away in 2014. Before we dive into the contents of the case file, I want to take you back to the summer of 1974, around the time Belinda went missing, in the rural community that surrounded Eagle Lake on the outskirts of Monticello, Minnesota. There were 2 types of people in the area at that time: those who lived there year-round and those with summer homes, cabins, who came up only when the weather was worthy. They'd typically winterize and close up their cabins for the colder months, and when spring and early summer came around, they'd do just the opposite: air out the cabin, maybe clean out a mouse trap or 2, and put the dock in the water. Belinda's family lived there year-round, Clifford and Beverly had 8 children. They grew up on a farm that was full of laughter and plenty of love. Here's Diane.
She had a life that a lot of us envied out there on the farm, and a big family and a lot of freedom. And
each summer, the neighborhood grew to accommodate the seasonal crowd, which added a fun new mix of friends and acquaintances, and even added babysitting jobs for the teenage girls. The area was, for the most part, safe. The Van Lith kids came and went, sometimes riding horses to and from friends' houses. Other times, they roamed around on foot, skipping off to swim or hang with friends. Life seemed more relaxed. So when Belinda took a house-sitting job for a neighbor a quarter of a mile down the road, nobody in the family thought much of it. It wasn't out of the ordinary or frowned upon. It was simply a way to make some cash and help a neighbor out. Looking back, though, Belinda's siblings do wonder why Belinda was house-sitting for Dwayne Cornwell, a single musician in his 30s.
Because I don't ever remember that we had any family interaction with him.
No.
Anybody in the family. So how did he know that I had a 17-year-old sister that would house sit? Mm-hmm. How did he know that? Well, that's the part I don't understand.
Dwayne had gone off to Nashville with his band early that summer, which is why Belinda was there. The investigative file revealed 2 possible answers as to why Belinda was needed. Dwayne had chickens, which needed to be looked after to a certain extent. He also had a tumultuous relationship with an ex-wife who had, at the time, recently moved out. In an interview conducted years later, Dwayne told investigators Belinda was there to make sure his ex-wife didn't come take his property. At the time she was house-sitting, though, not even her father, Clifford, seemed alarmed or concerned. The cabin was just down the road, and the Van Lith kids regularly stopped over to visit with Belinda. Wendy, who was 9 at the time, even almost stayed the night with her big sister around the time she went missing. Here's Wendy.
The day that we went, Mom said, come home. I wanted to stay.
She wanted you to stay overnight, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Mom had me come home because we were going to the rodeo or going to the
Buffalo
parade or something like that. And that was that Thursday?
Probably Thursday or
Friday.
Well, the parade is always on a Saturday.
Mm-hmm. So that would have been Friday that I had been there.
Clifford had also been over to Dwayne's house around that time. Belinda called her dad on June 13th, 2 days before she went missing. She complained to him that she was hearing noises. She thought a fuse had gone out. Clifford went there that night. He didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Belinda didn't seem at all distressed or concerned. The fuse did need repair, but he didn't have the necessary tools on him. The next day, June 14th, he went to the house and fixed the fuse. Belinda wasn't around, but that wasn't unusual. There was plenty for a 17-year-old girl to do around Eagle Lake. Family members assumed she went down to the lake, and maybe she had. On Saturday, June 15th, Belinda didn't show up to her sister's going-away party. Pam, the oldest sibling, was going off to Texas to join the Air Force. It was a big deal. The oldest Van Lith was leaving the nest, and so their parents hosted a party at their home. There was no reason for Belinda's family and friends to suspect anything was wrong with her at first. There were no family conflicts among Belinda and her siblings or parents. It was out of the ordinary, but they assumed she'd eventually stroll into the party wearing her warm smile. Her friend, Diane, who you heard from earlier, later told investigators during a 2008 interview that she spoke to Belinda on Friday night, June 14th. Diane didn't recall anything bizarre about that night or their conversation, only that Belinda had mentioned swimming in the lake that day with a boy from the neighborhood. In the days following Belinda's disappearance, another friend told investigators they spoke to her the following morning. According to the file, Belinda woke up to the phone ringing. Her friend, Debbie, was on the other end of the line. Belinda made plans to give her friend a pair of earrings later that day. On that same day, Dwayne returned home from his trip to Nashville. When he pulled in, he saw his mom was already there. She found the door was open, yet Belinda was nowhere to be found. Her belongings were still there, though. Shortly after, Belinda's parents also learned that their daughter wasn't there. Clifford spent June 16, 1974, Father's Day, and his birthday, trying to find his daughter. Law enforcement began their official investigation on Monday, June 17th. Officers didn't find anything valuable missing from the home where Belinda was house-sitting. Dwayne had a collection of expensive instruments, but they were all still there. Belinda's clothing and personal items were still scattered throughout the room where she was staying. Her bib overalls were crumpled up on the ground in the corner. Her makeup was scattered alongside the nearby bathroom sink, along with her class ring. Cornwell did report some suspicious circumstances to officers, though. One pink chenille blanket was missing. Later reports would mention the possibility of a butcher knife being missing, too. Officers also noticed a 20-inch square cut out of the screen with a sharp instrument near the back porch of the house. Officers noted that, quote, entry had not been made through the window, though they didn't indicate why they made that observation. Her parents checked through her things and discovered her wallet with identification was left in her room, along with all of her clothing and jewelry. The only thing that wasn't there was a signature item she always wore, a troll necklace with a leather strap. At the request of the family, law enforcement searched around Dwayne's residence. Nothing suspicious was discovered. It should be noted, though, that the search did not include the lake, nearby property, or surrounding farm fields. Investigators also looked into Dwayne. Kind of. Dwayne told investigators he and a bandmate stayed at the Scottish Hotel during their time in Nashville, before checking out on the evening of June 14th and making the 14-hour drive back to his home on Eagle Lake. Yet, when investigators checked into his claim, they noticed an inconsistency. A teletype returned to the Wright County Sheriff's Office stated that Dwayne checked out on June 13th, along with his bandmate. That means June 14th was unaccounted for. That seemed to be good enough for investigators, though. They noted in the report that there was a clearance of Cornwell at that time. And just like that, law enforcement dropped their suspicion that foul play was likely. They ended the police report by stating that she likely left willingly with someone she knew. The case was seemingly closed. Yet just 6 months later, investigators would be hit with a major twist in the case. In late December 1974, Timothy Crosby kidnapped a 19-year-old young woman in St. Paul. He took her to his cabin on Eagle Lake, roughly 100 yards from Dwayne Cornwell's residence. And when Wright County Sheriff's Office investigators learned that Timothy Crosby had taken a victim to his cabin, where he violently tied her up and sexually assaulted her, they realized they spoke with him 6 months earlier when officers knocked on his cabin door days after Belinda went missing and asked him if he had seen her. The thing is, he had. Timothy Crosby was actually the last person to see her. You've been listening to The Vault, a Forum Communications podcast. This series is dedicated to the missing persons case of Belinda Van Lith and the investigation that followed. Tune in next week for part 2. In the meantime, dive into images related to this case at inforum.com/thevault. That's where you'll find a photo of Belinda wearing the troll necklace we mentioned earlier. This is the first time, to our knowledge, that an image of that necklace has been shared with the public. Hopefully, Someone out there might know something about where that necklace was located or where it was found that could lead to answers. This series is written, narrated, and produced by me, Trisha Taurinskas. The Vault's editor is Jeremy Fugelberg. To support The Vault, head to inforum.com/subscribe. Thank you for listening.